I had YouTube's max level chess bot face off against the 3200 bot on chess.com. So YouTube has the white pieces, chess.com with the black. Let's get to it. So king's pawn opening, that is absolutely my go-to. Then chess.com heads over to c5. Then knight to f3 from YouTube, and chess.com pushes the pawn to d6. Another by the books move from YouTube. Queen's pawn comes out. It's taken by chess.com. The knight takes back. Then chess.com goes knight to f6. YouTube goes knight to c3. So far everything by the books. Chess.com pushes up the a pawn, preventing this bishop from pulling up over to b5, attacking the king. There's a terrible arrow I just drew, attacking the king. So YouTube goes bishop to e2, then e5, played by chess.com. Now, after everything by the books, YouTube finally makes a mistake, goes knight to f5. It's supposed to retreat over to b3. And with that, chess.com finds a great move, going pawn to d5, which kicks a key defender because it's looking to take this pawn. The bishop attacks over here. If the knight takes, this knight can simply take back. You don't want to let this pawn push forward. Once it's on the forward of the rank, it can become very powerful. So what does YouTube do? They decide to castle, which is a questionable move. The engine wants them to add more pressure to the knight over on f6, but YouTube does not see that. And then chess.com pushes up this pawn. The best move just kicks away the knight, and the entire position is blown up. You just look at the meter, it just kind of matches the board. You look at the development for chess.com, YouTube's in a lot of trouble, so got to get their knight out of the way. But instead of doing that, they bring the bishop over to g5 to, I guess, try and attack this knight. It's very well protected by the pawn and by the queen. So the pawn can just pick up the knight, and now chess.com has a completely winning position. So now YouTube does find an excellent move. Queen takes d8, which prevents chess.com from ever castling, but they can simply take back, and they are up material. So like a slight win, but not really. The meter is still completely in chess.com's favor. Now YouTube takes c3, just gets back the pawn, but that structure, I hate this in online play. It's like the worst structure. It's always just abused, man. Just a pawn chain completely ruined. So the bishop takes the knight on f5 for chess.com, and YouTube's pawn was able to take back, but just very, very isolated, very unprotected. Not a good formation. Now knight to d7 for chess.com is able to get in front of the king and get into battle at the same time. Now rook over to d1 for YouTube. The engine wants him to go to the b file, which would have attacked this pawn, but in this position, the knight here is pinned to the king. So chess.com moves their king up out of the way, then bishop to f3. An excellent choice for YouTube, but they're still down a lot in this position. So h6, getting the bishop up out of there, or he has to take the knight. So the bishop moves backwards, because right now YouTube is not going to want to trade material, considering that chess.com is +2 in this position. So next we have e4 for chess.com, attacking this bishop, protected by the knight, just pushing forward constantly. Great stuff going on. Now this bishop is in trouble. This bishop can't do much hiding over there. Now the king is semi-protected, but this entire side is destroyed. YouTube finds an excellent move, bishop to g3, which puts the king in check. So chess.com has to respawn, moving the king over to c6, which, you know, usually you think, okay, the king should get some type of protection, but it is fine in this position, just dominating on the meter with their king on the 6th rank. Now YouTube plays bishop to e2, and chess.com responds with bishop to e7. Now YouTube with a4, pushing up the pawn. Now chess.com develops the rook over to d8. YouTube with rook to d4, chess with bishop to c5. I mean, chess.com, we're all playing chess. Now anyway, rook back to d1. So instead, chess.com just continuing to find great moves. We got knight over to d5. Now bishop goes to b5, putting the king in check. But the pawn is able to take the bishop, and we have a pawn trade by YouTube. Next, chess.com brings our king to the 5th rank, taking on b5, and still just a dominant position. When you're up 2 knights, having an open king does not appear to be an issue. Now YouTube gets rid of the knight on d5. Chess.com goes knight to f6, attacking the rook. So YouTube just goes for a trade, taking the rook on d8, and chess.com takes back. Now YouTube goes rook to e1, rook to d2, play by chess.com, getting to that 7th rank, which is super powerful. Now rook to b1, play by YouTube, putting the king in check. The king's able to move up out of the way over to c4. Now bishop to e5, played by YouTube, which protects the pawn over on c3. But chess.com, I mean, that 3200 bot is about to cook up. So bishop takes f2. The king is unable to take back, so YouTube has to move their king up out of the way. Goes over to h1. The engine wants him over to f1, but similar move, still excellent. Now chess.com looking for a queen, gets the pawn over to e3. And you look at the position of YouTube's pieces, they really do not have anything to stop it. So they go after the king, looking for some kind of like Hail Mary checkmate. Rook over to b4. King able to step out of the way over to d5. Now, pawn push to c4, which is just a complete inaccuracy. Ninja wants them to create a pawn chain over on g4. With that, they have lost any life in the meter. It says mate in 8. Will chess.com find it? Yes, they will. So first, the king takes the bishop over on e5, getting rid of that piece. Now YouTube goes rook to b5, checking the king, and the king goes over to e4 to get up out of the way. Now rook to b1, just trying to stop something headed this way, but you got a rook, you got a bishop, you got a pawn, you got the king coming in. Good luck to that rook. Now e2 played, more pawn pushing from chess.com. g4 played, finally a defensive move, getting the pawn chain, but it is far too little too late from YouTube. Now rook to d1, the best move from chess.com. Either the king gets up out of the way, or the rook picks it up, and the pawn becomes a queen. There's really nothing good you can do from YouTube. They'll just step their king up out of the way over to g2. Now the rook picks up the rook over on b1. YouTube takes the bishop on f2, but the pawn to e1 becomes a queen, checking the king. So YouTube steps out of the way to g2. Queen to g1, checking the king. He only has one square to go, heading over to h3. And then chess.com finds checkmate with queen takes on g4. So if we look at the highlights, chess.com with a 97.5% accuracy, YouTube only at 84.8. It does say YouTube played at a higher level, which I'm not really sure how that works, but they did not find enough of the best moves like chess.com. So if you enjoyed, like and sub, comment other ideas, and stay joyful.